So here I'm going to get another wrinkle going, and I'm just forming a line and pushing down while I felt. Now you of course want to be careful of your needle, not to break it. That's why I use my workhorse for this. The thicker the needle, the better. You don't want to push down much at all with a fine needle. You'll snap your needle. So you can see there, hopefully, that I'm just forming some under the eye bags and wrinkles simply by felting a firm line, pushing down while I move along. So those are looking like some saggy, baggy old eyes. I do probably want to make some wrinkle attempts up in here as well, especially when the eyebrow is raised like this. Then you're certain to cause some wrinkles up in this area. So this I might need to really squish and manipulate with my hands to get the wrinkles forming in here. So this takes a little playing around, squeezing, squishing. See where it naturally wants to indent? And that's generally what I work with. So there was a little line forming right there. And when I squeeze it, it's just accentuated. So then I can really push my needle in there and get myself a nice wrinkle forming. So like I said, there's other ways to do wrinkles, but this is my favorite. The more I learn about trapping the air in, the more I want to do it like this. I just think it looks more natural. Just keep reworking those lines to get deeper wrinkles happening. And if you feel like maybe that you went too far or you worked it down too much, just remember to go back up in there the other way and sort of lift it back up. So there's some character happening, starting to take shape in her eyes. I think we should carry these wrinkles on right up into her forehead. So again, I'm really just manipulating with my hands, squeezing the wool, sort of seeing where some natural indentations happen, and I'm going with that. Wrinkles can really happen anywhere, right? So it's not that you can really mess it up. And of course they don't look like much yet, but when you get to finishing your piece and shading or adding wool for color and detail, you'll really emphasize all these crevices with a darker color, of course, because the deeper the line, the wrinkle, you would color it or shade it darker, right? Because those would be your shadows on the face. Yeah, I'm kind of liking that. And I better switch to the other side before I get too far and forget how I achieved all this to mimic it on the other side. We do want a semi-symmetrical piece here. So, let's see if I can recreate something similar over here. And it's funny, you'll gravitate to the whatever hand you are. I'm right-handed, of course, so I'll always work the right side first, and then I'm all awkward trying to do the left side. So sometimes it helps to switch it around a little bit, position it so that you can feel a little more comfortable working on it. So I think I'll start with pinning that brow up. And just check and make sure I'm on the right track, matching it up to the other side there. Okay, so that gave me more space to look on the inside of the eye here to work in some of these wrinkles. And I'm just pushing down, sort of dragging the needle and using some deeper thrusts to really lock in those wrinkles. Here we go. Definitely instantly adds the age to the character. Okay. Then I've got one coming in from the corner of the eye over here and coming down. My fingers down here again, just sort of pushing the wool, manipulating it, making sure I get a nice sort of bubble effect when I create those wrinkles. Alright, that's not too bad. They're not exactly the same, but not bad. Okay, that's looking pretty good. I might even add a little more wrinkle action here. I'm liking it. Alright, those eyes are coming along. Now for this upper brow here. And the surface felt this quite a bit. Still so loose and fluffy. Alright, now let's see if we can get some of these wrinkles happening as well. Now, go. There's one. Now that one I sort of did in two, and that one turned out to sort of be a solid one, so I'll have to work with that a little more. So I think I'm ready for some wrinkles in the forehead here, so I'm just going to sort of follow what I've already got going on with the brow. And again, I'm going to just push and hold these down while I poke straight through the mat to get some nice deep lines. And depending on what hair I use for this witch or a hat or whatnot, a lot of this might end up getting covered, but I still want it to be there. It adds a lot of character. So wrinkles can be really random. They can be pretty much whatever you dream up. Because your skin, if you look at your own skin, wrinkles really have no specific pattern. They can start and stop. They can be thick or thin. So you just do whatever you think looks right. Probably won't bother with too many up here because I know that there'll be some sort of wool attached for some stringy hair or something going on up here. So I think I'll just start to finish off the forehead by working it down a little bit, not leaving it quite so puffy. Now she's finally starting to get some age to her. So just back and forth in those same lines will really secure the wrinkles in. I pay a lot of attention to the edges of my mask so that it's really good and attached, because you notice I've really been kind of manipulating the wool, pulling it and whatnot throughout the whole sculpting process, and sometimes your edges can come loose, and that's the most critical part of the mask to stay attached. is around the edges. So I make sure several times throughout sculpting I really reinforce those edges and make sure all the wool is deeply attached around the outside of the mask. Because while someone's wearing it, that's really the area that'll get the most wear and tear. So it's really important to me that that is good and secure for the quality of my masks. Okay, now her eyes aren't quite symmetrical, but you know what, that's okay. It is a fictitious creature after all. And I think I'm just about ready to switch to my finer needle to do some more detailed sculpting on the nose and the lips and the cheeks. I think I've got pretty much all of my wrinkles established, locked in. Yeah, I think I really need to finalize this expression on the mouth and the lips. And I think we will grab the yellow needle for that. You can tell mine gets lots of use. It's coming apart. Okay, so the finer needle I usually just use for all the nice finishing work and for some detail sculpting to really tangle those fibers in nice and tiny. Won't leave pock marks like the big needles, you know, and sometimes leave some holes. And as I get closer to finishing and the shape that I want, I don't want to see big pock marks. So the closer I get, the finer the needle. And you'll notice I'm just flopping around from feature to feature. That's kind of how I get towards the end. I just tweak a little bit everywhere. Okay, so let's focus in on this mouth. What do I want her to be doing? Maybe snarling a little bit? So maybe I can get this lip to sort of curl up around at least one snaggle tooth. A little bit of a snarl. Notice I'm holding my hands in some weird positions. That's just because it's getting awkward. I'm working around the chin. Be real careful that this doesn't turn into a smile of any kind unless it's a conniving evil smile, which I don't know if I can pull off or not. I think the tooth is really going to help with this expression. That nose gets me every time. It's something I will continue to work with until I actually remove the mask. It's never done. There we go, kind of developing just a little crooked mouth smirk here. And I think once I add the tooth, it'll really, really help give the look I want. Now, the bottom lip is nowhere near done. I think I will add some chin wrinkles too. But I'm going to add those by adding wool because I don't have enough density in the wool down here to create the wrinkle. I think it's obvious how the hours are gobbled up in needle felting when you just keep tweaking and tweaking and tweaking. But when we have a vision in our head, we want it to come to reality. But the good news is no one else knows what that vision is. So, as long as you get a witch, no one knows exactly what you wanted your witch to look like. Sometimes they evolve better, and sometimes the mistake was made so early on in the amount of wool that you selected that there's sort of no going back. So you might as well just roll with it. cleaning up some of these lines now with the finer needle. This is my favorite needle, by the way. And at the beginning there, I'd give you a list of all of the tools that I use and where you can get them. Let's add those wrinkles now. So this really doesn't take very much wool at all. So I'm going to just peel off some, and I'm going to start the felting process in my hands, just rubbing and rolling it together, sort of form its own shape. Now I sort of want to put some coming in off the lip. That's too long, so that could be 2 wrinkles. And do the same for the other side. Alright, so there's the wrinkles. Now we're going to just tack them into place. So they have a little bit of texture all on their own just from simply rolling them. And now we're just going to lightly tack them in to position and shape them as we go. Really want them kind of coming down from the bottom lip there and into the chin. So essentially we've done the exact same thing as we did up in the forehead, but we used 2 different methods. Up here we used the air that was inside, trapped inside the wool, and then down here we've used additional pieces of wool rolled up to get pretty much the same effect. 2 different ways of going about it. Okay, and then we'll do the same on this side. Just sort of diminishing them off into the chin, coming down from the lips. Good thing about doing it this way is if you don't like it, you can rip them off. Okay, this just adds a little bit more texture to the lower jaw here. Now what I want to jump to straight away is some shading. I'm going to try something new today, so you may very well learn what not to do if it doesn't work. I'm going to get out my airbrush and actually have a go at airbrushing her face, as I think I've decided I want to make an albino witch. So I want her to be really pale and pasty. So I'm going to use a spray dye and my airbrush gun to attempt this. But honestly, I have not done this before, so let's hope it works. But firstly, I want to do the shadows. Remember earlier I talked about how all these wrinkles that we created are all the shadows, and I want to make them darker. So even though she's going to be an albino witch, I want to shade in all these shadows and crevices first, because the color I'm going to use to spray on her will be white. So I don't care if I go over the dark colors, because I can always make the dark darker, but I want to get them underneath the white so that they look just gray, really. Okay, so what I'm going to use first for shading is some pigment powders. Now, I just have these little pigment chalks from back in my scrapbooking days, and they work really great. They're just pigment chalks, powders, and I just use either a paintbrush or a makeup applicator to apply them. So I'm going to work in the grays and browns and blacks here for detailing all of the shadows. I usually start with the gray because I know I can go darker, so I'm going to just apply some grays in here now. And if that's not dark enough for me, or if I want to take it more into a brown, then I'll make that call as I go. So these are pigments, and what I like about pigments is there's a lot of color in them. They're pretty saturated, so once I seal those in, that color will stay. So you can tell the effect right away just by bringing some attention to the shadows and highlights of the sculpture. It really makes a difference. And if you're not sure how to do this, just a good rule of thumb to follow is indents are shadows and protrusions are highlights, as a very general rule. So anything that I have squished down, indented, made wrinkles, I am going to run my gray in. Now, of course, I can do this with wool, but for the purpose of this video and time, I am going to shade like this and use my airbrush for a new method that I've been wanting to try. So nothing like trying it with a live audience here. Like I said, you may learn what not to do. But let's hope for the best. I'm going to think positive at this point. In theory it should work, but you never know. With liquid dyes and wool, of course, because this mask is not pre-treated, it's not wet, it's not soaked. So I think my biggest fear is simply the balling up, the sort of the wet molecules on top of the wool, which will not look good. So I think I just really have to get the right distance with my airbrush gun, and we'll see what happens. But highlighting all of these ahead of time Any area that's shadowed is really going to help. I'm liking the gray so far, so I'm going to stick with it for now. And this part can continually be tweaked. Even after I add the airbrushing paint, I will be able to continue to add more depth to the shadows. I think I'm going to add some kind of brownish tones into the eye area here too. I want it to sort of look just creepy and sickly, and see what that does, if anything. Like I said, I'm not worried about going too dark on these right now because I'm going to cover over it with the white. I'm thinking that looks pretty good. Right away it gives a nice sense of depth. Maybe really makes all those things you work so hard sculpting pop out. And the reason I've jumped to this before I've done the ears or anything else is that if the airbrushing works, my face can be drying while I show you the ears. So I just want to make sure I've got all of my darks in place. Alright, see how nice and quick that is? I really do like that method, especially if you really want to use the tone in this core wool. If you want to use it and just sort of give it a little tint, like some flesh colors, and if you don't have the right color of wool, this is a good option. Like I said, as long as you seal in these pigments. Okay. I'm going to prep the airbrush, and we're going to all hold our breath and hope that this works out. But the good thing is I'll know right away if it's not going to work. And if it doesn't, we'll go to plan B.